"You're not getting a single dollar," Dad said after giving my brother the house. Then my phone rang. "Mr. Lawson, Grandpa's will just cleared. You're now officially the $32 million heir." The room went dead silent. It was a Sunday. My parents had invited the entire extended family for what they called a celebration lunch. The real purpose was the announcement. My father, Russell, stood at the head of the table with his hand on Mitchell's shoulder and told the room that the family house, the 4-bedroom on Briar Lane that I had grown up in, was being transferred to Mitchell and his wife, Kristen. A fresh start, he called it, a reward for everything Mitchell had built. Mitchell had not built anything. He was 34 years old and had not held a steady job in 3 years. He called himself a consultant. His consulting involved making phone calls from the couch and sending invoices that never got paid. But he had 2 children and a wife with expensive taste and a father who confused noise with ambition. That was enough to earn him an $850,000 house. My father looked at me when he said it. Not at Mitchell, at me. He wanted to see my face when the blade went in. "Carter has his firehouse," he said. "He chose that life. Mitchell chose family. And family gets the house." Nobody spoke. My Aunt Maureen set her fork down quietly. My mother, Janet, stared at the centerpiece. Then Russell leaned across the table, close enough that the people on either side could hear the shift in his voice. "Your grandfather wasted his life buying shacks in bad neighborhoods. And you are just like him. A man with a hose and no future, pretending hard work means something." He straightened up and lifted his glass. "At least Mitchell built something real." That was the line. In front of 31 people, in a dining room decorated with grocery store flowers and a banner that said "Family First." My father compared me to a dead man and called us both worthless. The silence that followed was the kind of silence that proves everyone heard it, and nobody plans to challenge it. I sat perfectly still. My hands were under the table, flat on my thighs. A firefighter learns early that the worst thing you can do in a crisis is move before you know what is burning. So I did not move. I let the room settle into its verdict. I let Mitchell squeeze Kristen's hand. I let my mother refill her water glass. I let my cousin take a photo of the keys for the family group chat. What none of them knew, what Maureen had told me 6 weeks ago on a bench outside the hospital where Pop spent his last days, was that Pop had a separate attorney, a separate will, a trust nobody in the family had seen. It was in probate and would take weeks to clear. "Your father does not know," Maureen had said. Harold made sure of that. She told me to be patient. She told me something was coming. So I sat at that table and I let Russell give away a house he did not own, and I did not say a word, because the best fires to let burn are the ones people set under their own feet. And then my phone rang. Not a text. Not a notification, a phone call, which is something that almost never happens on a Sunday afternoon unless someone is dead or something institutional has finished processing. The caller ID read Harding Estate Services. I knew that name. She told me not to say a word to Russell. "Your father does not know," she said. Harold made sure of that. I stood up from the table. Russell gave me a look like I was excusing myself from something I did not have the right to interrupt. I stepped into the hallway and answered. "Mr. Lawson, this is Wesley Harding. I am the executor and trustee of your grandfather Harold Lawson's independent estate." His voice was flat, legal, the kind of voice that charges by the minute. "The probate filing cleared this morning. I am calling to formally notify you that you are the sole named beneficiary of the Harold R. Lawson Living Trust. The current assessed value of the trust portfolio is $32 million. I will need to schedule an in-person meeting this week to begin the transfer." I did not respond for about 4 seconds, not because I did not understand, because I needed those 4 seconds to let the number settle into a body that had just been told it was worth nothing. "Mr. Lawson?" Wesley said. "Are you still there?" "I am here," I said. "Monday morning works." I walked back into the dining room. 31 faces turned toward me. Russell was still holding his glass. The keys were still on the table in front of Mitchell. The banner still said "Family First." I picked up my jacket from the back of my chair. I did not sit down. "Who was that?" Russell asked. "Pop's attorney," I said. Russell's glass lowered an inch. "What attorney?" "Harold did not have a separate attorney." "He did," I said. "And his will just cleared." I buttoned my jacket. "The estate is $32 million. I am the only name in it." The glass hit the table, not because Russell dropped it, because his hand stopped working. The water spilled across the white tablecloth and reached the house keys before anyone moved. Mitchell's mouth opened and closed twice, without producing a sound. Kristen's hand went to his arm and gripped it. Janet looked at Russell, then at me, then at the wet tablecloth, and her expression was the expression of a woman who has just realized that the floor she has been standing on for 30 years is not concrete. It is cardboard. And it is getting wet. Aunt Maureen did not move. She picked up her fork and took another bite of her food. She was the only person in the room still eating. She caught my eye across the table and held it for exactly 1 second. That second contained 30 years of patience. Someone at the far end of the table whispered, "32 million?" The whisper moved through the room the way a match moves through dry grass. I could hear chairs shifting, phones being put down, forks being set on plates. I walked out the front door and did not look back. The drive home took 22 minutes. I kept the radio off. My hands were on the wheel, and my heartbeat was the same steady rhythm it holds when the alarm goes off at the station and the bay doors open and the truck rolls out into whatever is burning. Controlled. Trained. Not calm, because I felt calm. Calm because I had been taught that the worst thing you can do in an emergency is let your body run faster than your brain. Pop taught me that. In the truck. On Saturday mornings, between properties. "You cannot help anyone if you are panicking," he said once. "Panic is just fear that forgot to sit down." My family thought I drove a 10-year-old truck because I could not afford better. My family thought I worked at a fire station because I was not smart enough for anything else. My family had spent my entire life measuring me against a brother who produced nothing and concluding that I was the one who fell short. They did not know what Pop built. They did not know who he built it for. And the man who just called me a waste of a life was standing in a dining room full of witnesses, watching dirty water spread across a tablecloth, realizing he had given away a house that was never his. What my family calls my career is what the department calls Engine Company 14. I have worked there for 9 years. I have carried people out of burning buildings. I have driven an engine through intersections at 3 in the morning, with nothing between me and a structure fire but a helmet and a set of turnout gear that smells like diesel and old sweat. I make $67,000 a year. My brother made $12,000 last year and called it a slow quarter. The family thinks I play with hoses. My captain trusts me with the lives of everyone on the rig. Those two realities have never been in the same room, and I stopped trying to introduce them a long time ago. But here is the part my family never learned. My grandfather, Harold Pop Lawson, was also a firefighter. Engine Company 9, 32 years, retired as captain. While he was running into buildings, he was also quietly buying properties in neighborhoods that nobody else wanted. Small houses, duplexes, a strip mall on the south end of town that everyone called a waste of concrete until the highway expansion put it on the main route. Over 40 years, Pop built a portfolio of 22 properties across 3 counties. He managed them himself. He collected the rent himself. He never hired a property manager because he did not trust anyone else with the numbers. And the only person he ever brought along on his rounds was me. Starting when I was 13, every other Saturday, Pop would pick me up in his truck, and we would drive from property to property. He showed me how to check a foundation, how to spot a water leak before it hit the subfloor, how to talk to a tenant who was behind on rent without making them feel like they owed you something beyond the payment. He taught me that wealth was not what you displayed, it was what you maintained. At his funeral, my father gave a 4-minute eulogy that mentioned the fire department once, and the properties not at all. Mitchell did not attend. He said he had a meeting. The meeting was a golf game. I know because Kristen posted a photo of him on the 9th hole, the same afternoon we buried the man who had built everything our family had, without anyone noticing. Aunt Maureen was the only other person who understood. She is Pop's daughter-in-law, married to Russell's late brother Dennis, who died of a heart attack at 51. Maureen stayed in the family because she loved Pop, not because she owed Russell anything. At my fire academy graduation when I was 19, Maureen drove 3 hours to be there. She brought Pop. He was already walking with a cane by then, his knees gone from decades of climbing ladders. He stood in the front row of the auditorium, while my father and mother stayed home because Mitchell was hosting a dinner party that same night. When the captain called my name, I walked across the stage, and Pop was waiting at the end of the line. He reached up with both hands, shaking, and pinned the badge onto my chest himself. Maureen took one photograph. That photograph is still in my locker at the station, taped to the inside of the door, next to Pop's old fire helmet that I took from his garage after the funeral. Nobody else wanted it. The brass badge on the front is scratched, and the chin strap is cracked, and it smells like smoke from a different decade. It is the most valuable thing I own. Before I tell you what I found inside Pop's estate, you need to understand what it cost me to stay in this family long enough to receive it. When I was 18, I told my father I wanted to attend the fire academy. The tuition was $12,000. Russell looked at me across the kitchen table and said, "Firefighting is a poor man's career. Carter, I am not paying for you to hold a hose." The same year, he wrote a check for $85,000 to cover Mitchell's business school tuition at a private university Mitchell chose because it had a golf team. Mitchell dropped out after 3 semesters. Nobody asked for the money back. Nobody asked where the tuition went. Pop paid my fire academy tuition in cash, in an envelope, handed to me in the cab of his truck, outside the registration office. He told me not to tell Russell. I did not. I carried that envelope in my jacket until the check cleared, because some gifts are too heavy to set down. When I was 23, I saved for 11 months to buy a used truck. A Ford Ranger, 8 years old, one previous owner, exactly the kind of truck Pop would have approved of. I kept the cash in an envelope in my dresser, counting it every Sunday. A week before I planned to pick it up, Russell took the money and gave it to Mitchell, whose BMW had thrown a transmission. "Your brother has a real career," he said. "He needs to get to work." Mitchell's real career at that point was sending cold emails to people who did not respond. I rode the bus to the station for 8 months. My shift started at 6 in the morning. The first bus ran at 5:15. I stood at the stop in the dark with my gear bag over one shoulder, and some mornings the bag was heavier than anything I had carried out of a burning building. When I was 26, I got married. Small ceremony, 12 people, a park with a rented tent. My father did not come. He sent Mitchell with a card that said, "Good luck with the firehouse girl." My wife's name was not mentioned. The marriage lasted 2 years. She left because my family treated her like furniture, and I did not have the language yet to tell them to stop. She was right to leave. I do not blame her. But the card Russell sent is still in a box in my closet because some evidence you keep even when the case is closed. 2 years later, Mitchell married Kristen in a ballroom Russell rented for $18,000. Live band. Open bar. 40 guests flown in from 3 states. Russell gave an 11-minute toast that made him cry. He called Mitchell the best man he had ever known. I watched the highlights on Instagram from the station kitchen, standing next to the coffee machine, and my captain asked me if I was all right. I told him I was fine. I was not fine. But the shift was starting, and there was work to do, and work has never once asked me why I looked tired. And when I was 28, Russell asked to borrow $15,000 for emergency home repairs. The roof on Briar Lane was leaking. The gutters were rotted. I gave him the money, because the house was where I grew up, and Pop had built the addition with his own hands, and I could not stand the idea of water getting into the walls he framed. The money went to renovating Mitchell's old bedroom into a home office, with built-in shelving, new hardwood floors, and a standing desk that cost $3,200. Mitchell posted the finished room on Instagram with the caption, "Dad really outdid himself." The $15,000 was never mentioned again. The roof still leaks. Every time, the answer was the same: Carter can handle it. Carter is strong. Carter chose the firehouse. Mitchell is the one who needs help. And every time I handled it. Meanwhile, Mitchell drove a $72,000 BMW X5 that he parked in the driveway of the house Pop owned as if it were a trophy he had earned. Kristen posted brunch photos 3 times a week from restaurants where the appetizers cost more than my grocery bill. Their apartment before the house announcement was a 2-bedroom in the Heights at $3,400 a month, subsidized by Russell, who believed Mitchell was on the verge of something big. Mitchell's consulting website had not been updated in 14 months. His LinkedIn said CEO and founder of a company that had no employees, no clients, and no revenue. I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment 4 blocks from the station. My truck had 180,000 miles on it. My boots cost $140, and I wore them until the soles cracked. Russell told people I was doing his thing whenever someone asked about me, the way you describe a cousin who moved to another country and stopped sending updates. He never once told anyone what Engine Company 14 does, because telling people his son ran into burning buildings for a living would have complicated the version of the family where Mitchell was the successful one, and I was the afterthought. If you have ever watched your family spend your money, your time, and your name on someone else, and then tell you that you are the one who does not contribute, this story was written for you. Subscribe to Family Secret Tales, drop a comment with the city you are watching from, and stay with me. What I found in Pop's filing cabinet changed everything. Wesley Harding's office was on the 14th floor of a building downtown that smelled like old paper and mahogany furniture. He was in his 60s, silver-haired, precise, the kind of man who counts syllables before he speaks. He laid the trust documents across the conference table and walked me through the portfolio, piece by piece. 22 properties, 12 residential rentals, 4 commercial units including the strip mall, a converted fire station that Pop had turned into luxury loft apartments, now valued at $2.8 million. A development lot on the East Corridor assessed at $4.2 million. The family house on Briar Lane. Total assessed value, $32.4 million. Your grandfather structured this as a living trust, Wesley said. It bypasses probate entirely. Your father is not mentioned. Your brother is not mentioned. The sole beneficiary is you. I looked at the trust document, Pop's signature at the bottom, the date next to it, March 14th, 7 years ago. There is something else, Wesley said. He opened a separate envelope older than the rest, the paper slightly yellowed, and slid a single page across the table. Handwritten, Pop's block letters, the same handwriting from every birthday card he had ever sent me, the same handwriting from the note inside the tuition envelope all those years ago. The letter said, "I changed the will the day your father told you firefighting was a poor man's career." I was sitting in the next room. He did not know I heard him. But I heard. And I decided that day that everything I built would go to the one person in this family who understood what it cost. You picked up the helmet, Carter. Nobody made you. You picked it up. I almost set the letter down and walked out of the room. Some things are too heavy to hold while other people are watching. The words blurred for a second, and I pressed my thumb against the bottom of the page to steady it. Pop had written this years ago, in a house I was not allowed to call mine, at a table where my name was never the first one mentioned. He had been keeping score the whole time. Not the kind of score my family kept, where everything flowed toward Mitchell. The opposite kind. The kind that watched and waited and left the receipt in a locked filing cabinet for the day it would matter. Wesley waited. I folded the letter, put it in my chest pocket, and asked the next question. The house on Briar Lane. My father just announced he is giving it to my brother. Wesley leaned back. He cannot give away a property he does not own. That house has been in your grandfather's trust since 1998. The deed is in Harold Lawson's name. Your father has been living in it as a permitted occupant, not an owner. And the rent? Wesley opened a second folder. Thicker, color-coded tabs. Your grandfather's properties generate approximately $31,000 per month in combined rental income. For the past 5 years, your father has been collecting that rent directly from tenants, using a management agreement he signed himself. The agreement was never authorized by your grandfather. The funds were deposited into your father's personal account. I did the math. 5 years, $31,000 a month, $1,860,000. Nearly $2 million collected from tenants who had been paying rent on properties Pop maintained for decades. Tenants who called Russell the landlord because that is what he told them he was. Tenants who never once met the man whose name was actually on the deed. Russell had been living off Pop's work while telling me that Pop wasted his life buying shacks. He built a lifestyle, a reputation, a position in the family around money that was never his. Every golf club membership, every gift to Mitchell, every Christmas dinner where he sat at the head of the table and performed generosity. All of it was funded by a dead man's properties and a lie he told himself so many times he forgot it was one. Your grandfather discovered the unauthorized collections 14 months before he died, Wesley said. That is when he contacted me. That is when he restructured the trust to remove your father entirely. Wesley closed the folder. The estate will be pursuing full recovery of those funds. My father had not given Mitchell the house because he loved him. He gave it away because he knew the will was about to clear. He was trying to move property out of the trust before I inherited it. He was not being generous. He was destroying evidence. And in his rush to offload, he gave away a house he had never owned in front of 31 witnesses while calling me worthless. If you have ever discovered that the person who told you that you had no future was secretly stealing from the man who believed in yours, do not leave now. Subscribe to Family Secret Tales, hit the like button, and stay. The confrontation is next. Wesley sent a formal notice to Russell the following Thursday. The letter stated that the trust had been activated, that all properties were now under Carter Lawson's legal ownership, and that the unauthorized rent collection had been referred for recovery proceedings. Russell called me 11 times in 2 hours. The first message was quiet, confused, almost polite. The third was angry. The fifth was bargaining. By the seventh, he was making threats he could not enforce. The ninth was begging, the kind of begging a man does when he realizes that the person he has been ordering around for 30 years is the one holding the keys. By the 11th, he was crying, not sobbing, just the wet, broken breathing of a man whose voice has run out of registers to try. I did not answer any of them. I listened to each voicemail exactly once, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that went cold 3 messages in. Mitchell called once. He did not leave a voicemail. Instead, he texted, "The contractor starts Monday. Dad said the house is mine. You need to back off." He had already hired a crew to renovate the kitchen. $40,000 quote. Deposit paid that morning from a credit card Kristen did not know about. He followed up with a second text 20 minutes later. "This is my family's home, Carter. Don't do this." I almost responded to that one. My thumb hovered over the keyboard for a long time. Mitchell had never once called it my family's home when I was sleeping in my old bedroom during holiday visits while he took the guest suite. He had never once said "don't do this" when Russell was taking money out of my dresser, or skipping my wedding, or calling my wife the firehouse girl. The phrase "family's home" only appeared when the home was leaving his hands. I forwarded both texts to Wesley without responding. 2 weeks later, Russell and Mitchell walked into the offices of Summit Title and Escrow to formalize the deed transfer. Russell had scheduled the appointment himself. He brought Mitchell, Kristen, and a manila folder of paperwork he believed would complete the transaction. He was wearing his good suit. Mitchell was carrying a binder of renovation plans. Kristen was carrying a tote bag from a furniture store with fabric samples poking out of the top. They did not know I was already seated at the conference table. Wesley was beside me. The title officer, a woman named Debra, was behind her desk with the county records already pulled up on her screen. When Russell walked through the door and saw me, his step broke. Not a stumble, a hesitation, the kind that tells you a man has just walked into a room he no longer controls. "What is this?" Russell said. "Carter, what are you doing here?" "Sit down, Dad." He did not sit. Mitchell stepped in behind him, saw Wesley, saw the folder on the table, and stopped moving entirely. Kristen stayed in the doorway. Deborah cleared her throat. "Mr. Lawson, before we proceed with any transfer, I need to confirm the current deed holder." She turned her monitor so the room could see it. "The property at 41 Briar Lane is held in the Harold R. Lawson Living Trust, established 1998. The registered owner is Harold Lawson. There is no co-owner. There is no transfer of title on file." Russell's mouth opened. No sound. He looked at the screen, then at the title officer, then at me. His hand went to the back of the chair in front of him, but he did not sit. He stood there, gripping the leather, his knuckles turning the color of old paper. 30 years he had lived in that house. 30 years he had told people it was his. He had held barbecues on the back patio, installed a mailbox with his last name engraved on it, refinished the front porch railing, and posted the photos online. He had done everything an owner does, except own it. "You never owned the house, Dad," I said. "Pop let you live there. That is all." Wesley opened his folder. "As executor of the Harold Lawson Trust, I can confirm that Mr. Russell Lawson was a permitted occupant, not a title holder. The property, along with 21 additional holdings valued collectively at $32 million, now belongs to Carter Lawson as sole beneficiary." Mitchell dropped the renovation binder. It hit the carpet with a flat, heavy sound. Pages of kitchen layouts and paint samples fanned out across the floor. He looked at Russell the way a child looks at a parent who just walked off a stage. Russell did not look back. He was still staring at the screen. His hands went to the edge of the table and gripped it with both sets of fingers, the way a man grips something when the floor feels like it is moving. "That is not possible," Russell said. His voice was thin. "Harold would not do this. I am his son." "You are his son," Wesley said, without inflection. "That is correct. And he removed you from the trust by name." He paused. "Specifically by name." Wesley slid a second document across the table. The rent collection summary. 5 years. $31,000 per month. $1.86 million deposited into Russell's personal checking account from tenants who believed he was the authorized manager. The document was 8 pages long. Every deposit dated. Every property listed. Every tenant payment matched to Russell's bank records. "Your father discovered the unauthorized collections 14 months before his death," Wesley said. "The estate will be pursuing full recovery. I would recommend retaining counsel." Wesley paused. Then he opened one more page. "There is also the matter of your most recent tax filing, Mr. Lawson. You claim the transfer of this property as a charitable gift deduction, an $850,000 deduction on an asset you do not own and have never owned. That filing has been flagged." He closed the folder. "You did not just collect unauthorized rent. You claimed a tax benefit on a house that belongs to your son." Russell had created his own EARS referral. He had signed the form himself. He had mailed it himself. Nobody asked him to do it. He filed a fraudulent deduction on a property he never held title to, and he did it because he assumed nobody would ever check. That was always his assumption, that nobody was watching, that nobody would hold a loop to the numbers. Russell's grip on the table loosened. His hands slid off the edge and dropped to his sides. His jaw was working, but the words had stopped forming. He looked like a man who had walked into his own surprise party and realized it was an intervention. The good suit he had worn to celebrate the transfer of a house he never owned now hung on his shoulders the way a flag hangs when there is no wind. Debra, the title officer, closed her folder and placed both hands flat on her desk. She had processed thousands of transactions. She had seen disputes, fraud, family fights over property. But she had never seen a man walk in with a ribbon for a gift and walk out with a recovery notice. She looked at Russell once, then at her computer screen, and did not look at him again. Mitchell pulled out his phone. The Instagram story from 2 weeks ago was still live. A photo of the house keys with the caption, "New chapter." Blessed family first, 212 likes, 14 heart emojis from Kristen's friends. Wesley looked at the phone. "I would recommend removing that post, Mr. Lawson. That property is no longer available to you." Kristen turned and walked out of the title office without saying a word. Her heels clicked down the hallway, fast, the rhythm of a woman who had just recalculated her entire future in under 30 seconds. Mitchell looked at the door Kristen had walked through. Then he looked at me. For the first time in his life, there was nothing behind his expression. No smugness, no entitlement, no assumption that someone would fix this for him. Just the blank stare of a man who had finally run out of people to stand behind. I stood up. I picked up Pop's letter from the table, folded it, and placed it back in my chest pocket. Pop told me once that wealth is not what you display. It is what you maintain. I buttoned my jacket. "You never maintained anything, Dad. You just took." I walked out of the title office. Wesley followed. Behind us, the room stayed exactly as we left it. Russell at the table, Mitchell standing, Debra's screen still showing the deed. The renovation binder on the floor, open to a page of kitchen layouts for a house that would never be his. If this story hit you, drop a comment telling me you stayed until the end. Subscribe to Family Secret Tales. Every story here is built for the people who were told they were not enough and turned out to be the only ones who were. Now let me tell you what came after. The fallout moved through the family the way smoke moves through a building. Floor by floor, room by room. Mitchell's BMW was repossessed 19 days after the title office. The $72,000 vehicle had been financed using a personal guarantee from Russell, who could no longer cover the payments once Wesley froze the rent collection pipeline. The repo crew came at 6 in the morning. Mitchell stood in the driveway in a bathrobe, watching them hook the front axle. He was holding his phone, but he was not recording. He was looking at the empty space where the car had been, the way you look at a chair someone just stood up from for the last time. The neighbors across the street were watering their lawn. They did not wave. Kristen's Instagram went private within 48 hours. The vacation photos, the restaurant posts, the carefully staged shots of the house she believed was hers. All of it locked behind a profile picture that still showed her smiling at Mitchell's birthday dinner. 2 weeks later, she moved to her mother's house in Delaware with both children and a suitcase that looked like it was packed in under an hour. She filed separation papers before the month ended. Mitchell found out through a notification on his phone, not a conversation. He sat on the couch of the one-bedroom sublet he had moved into, scrolling through Kristen's now private profile, tapping the follow request button and watching it bounce back. He did this 4 times before he stopped. The house on Briar Lane still had Harold Lawson's name on the deed. Mitchell was asked to vacate within 60 days. The contractor who had been hired for the kitchen remodel sent a demand letter for the $40,000 deposit that had already been spent. Mitchell did not have it. Russell did not have it. The kitchen remained exactly as Pop had built it in 1998. Oak cabinets. Linoleum floor. A window above the sink that looks out on a yard nobody has maintained. Russell stopped returning calls from his golf partners. The men he played with every Thursday had heard the story from their wives, who had heard it from Maureen, who did not spread gossip but answered direct questions with direct facts. The church group Russell co-led removed his name from the volunteer rotation. The deacon called and thanked him for his years of service. Russell hung up and sat in the living room of the house he had lived in for 30 years, but never owned, staring at the wall where a framed photo of Pop used to hang before he took it down and replaced it with a mirror. The mirror showed a man sitting alone in a room that belonged to his youngest son. Janet called once. A Wednesday evening. Her voice was the same voice she had used my entire life. Soft, careful, built to avoid conflict at any cost. He is your father, Carter. He made mistakes. But he is still your father. Can you come for dinner? We can talk about all of this like a family. She did not mention the $1.86 million. She did not mention the deed. She did not mention the Sunday where her husband told me I was worthless in front of 31 relatives. She mentioned dinner, as if pot roast could close a trust filing. I almost called her back. The reflex was old, heavy, built into the part of me that still remembered being a kid in that house, eating cereal at the counter while Pop read the newspaper across from me. The part that wanted the family to have been real, even though the paperwork proved it never was. My hand was on the phone. My thumb was on her name. Then I looked at the shelf above my work desk. Pop's helmet was sitting there, next to the framed photograph from the academy graduation, next to the letter I had laminated the day after Wesley gave it to me. You picked up the helmet, Carter. Nobody made you. I put the phone down. I did not call back. There is a morning I want to leave you with. A Tuesday, 6 weeks after the title office. Early light coming through the roll-up doors of Engine Company 14. The bay smells like diesel and rubber, and the particular kind of clean that only comes from a floor that gets mopped at the end of every shift. My turnout gear is hanging from its hook, heavy, familiar, next to it, on a small shelf I built myself, Pop's fire helmet. The brass badge is tarnished. The chin strap is cracked. It has not been inside a burning building in over a decade, but it still smells like smoke from the years when it was. Somewhere across town, Russell is sitting in a house that has his son's name on the deed. Not his own. The mirror he hung where Pop's photo used to be reflects a living room that is quieter than it has ever been. Mitchell is sleeping on a fold-out couch in a one-bedroom sublet, scrolling through a phone that Kristen no longer answers. The kitchen he was going to renovate is still the same kitchen Pop built in 1998. Oak cabinets and linoleum, and a window above the sink that looks out on a yard where nothing has been maintained. The renovation binder is still on the floor of the title office. Nobody went back for it. And I am sitting on the bumper of the engine, lacing my boots, getting ready for a shift. The portfolio Wesley manages on my behalf generated $31,000 last month. I have not touched a dollar of it. I do not need to. The money sits where Pop built it, maintained by the same kind of patience he used to build it in the first place. The work Pop built is safe. The work I built is mine. They were always the same kind of work, his and mine. Walk into the building. Protect what matters. Do not wait to be thanked. Pop's letter is in my locker, next to the photograph, next to the helmet. I read it once a week, not because I forget what it says, but because some mornings you need to hear a dead man's voice tell you that the thing everyone called a waste was the only thing that was real. The truth was never in the house, or the money, or the keys on the table. The truth was in who showed up, who maintained, who walked into the fire when everyone else walked out. Pop knew. He always knew. And the helmet he left me is worth more than everything in the trust, because it is the reason the trust exists.